Welcome everyone to Fruits of the Orchard. We are now going to learn Parshat Korach. Just in case people don't know the whole story, so Korach, he challenges Moshe. This is one of the greatest challenges that Moshe had during the 40 years, even though there are a number of times that Moshe was about to be stoned by the people, and in Parshat Shlach, they're about to pick new leaders and go back to Egypt. But nonetheless, we see that Korach's challenge, we can see by the way Moshe reacted to it, was like really a powerful challenge to his leadership. And so I'm going to read the Korach. The parsha begins, Vayikach Korach. Korach took. And then if you read the rest of the verse, it just gives his lineage. And it doesn't say what he took. It says, and Korach, the son of, and it goes to his lineage, took. So everyone asks, well, what did he take? So the answer, he took the people with his words. He mesmerized the people with his statement. And what was his statement? He says in front of the people, he says to Moshe, you take too much upon yourselves. For the entire congregation are all holy, and God is in their midst. So why do you raise yourself above God's assembly? Very, very short, we'll call it a populist statement that he makes. And Moshe goes into a total defensive posture because of this statement. So what was Korach saying? So he was really saying three things. One, all the people are holy. Secondly, and God is in their midst, in everyone's midst. And thirdly, why have you put yourself in a position higher or more powerful than everyone else? So the first two, so much discussion in Hasidut that Korach had a very, very strong reasoning here, because all the people were holy and God was in their midst. So one of my favorite statements from Reb Shlomo was, he used to say, not every Jew is holy, but every Jew is the holy of holiest. What did he mean? Not every Jew thinks, speaks, and acts in a holy way. That's quite obvious. He said, but in a person's, what's called panemius, in their inside of their inside, every Jew is the holy of holiest. That is that point of godliness, call it the Pintele Yid. Within, that's the Yechidah, the highest level of soul within each Jew. So that is what Korach was saying. Korach is saying, why do you hold yourself more holy than anyone else? We're all holy. So obvious is this kind of statement has a lot of appeal. And then the second thing was, and God is in our midst. Moshe, you think he talks to you, but he's within all of our midst. So what did he mean here? So we know that when God first instructed Moshe to build a tabernacle, So the statement is, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. Make for me a holy place, a mikdash, and I will dwell in their midst. And the famous commentary is, it doesn't say in its midst, meaning in the tabernacle, but in their midst, that God is present within each and every person in the midst of the congregation. So Moshe, why are you putting yourself higher than everyone else? So if we look a little bit further, the name of this article, for those who want to follow it, is on page 406 in Fruits of the Orchard, is called Equality and Hierarchy. In other words, the challenge here is, are we all equal? And if we're all equal, why do we have this idea or concept that we see everywhere called hierarchy? So let's look at that a little bit deeper. So there's a discussion in the Talmud about what is the most important statement in the Torah. If you could boil it down to one statement. So there are many, many different ideas. One of them is V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But Ben Azai said this. This is in the 5th chapter of Genesis, Bereshit. He says, this is the book of the generations of Adam. On the day that God created Adam in his image, he created him. And so Ben Azai said the most important statement in the Torah is, we are all human beings. And we all come from Adam. And therefore, no one, this is what Ben Azai says, and we learn from this, that no one can hold themselves on as being greater or more important, because we're all coming from the same place. We're coming from one original human being. And so all humans in that sense are equal. That was Ben Azai's commentary. So also, if you see, I'm quoting from the Declaration of Independence of the United States, where it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So here again, in the Declaration of Independence, right at the beginning, is this idea of all people are created equal. This is of course what Ben Azai was saying, and what the founders of America were saying, that all people are created equal, and it should be engraved in the laws of the land. And also, if you look at the Pledge of Allegiance of the United States, I pledge the allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I'm just bringing these examples. There are probably many other examples from many other countries. This idea of the equality of all human beings. And yet the paradox is, if you look at any society, any religion, any business, any community, you will have hierarchy, where people have positions of power or responsibility, or who can give the orders more than other people. So the question is, how do we balance this? And the way that we get hierarchy is because it's a natural instinct in human societies that it makes sense. Now, where do we see it in the Torah? So this is in Parshat Yitro. This is the whole incident when Moshe is trying to judge all of the people. And Yitro comes to him, his father-in-law comes to him and says, "What are you doing? You don't have enough strength to be the judge of everyone." And the people, like, can you imagine the lines around the block to see Moshe Rabbeinu? It's like you have one judge for an entire people. How is that going to work? And so I'm just going to read it because this is Yitro's advice, and Moshe took the advice. So it's in Exodus chapter 18, verses 21 to 24. You'll see it in Fruits of the Orchard on page 408. So his advice to Moshe was like this: choose out of the entire nation men of substance, God-fearers, people of truth who hate monetary gain, and you shall appoint over them leaders over thousands, leaders over hundreds, leaders over 50s, and leaders over 10s. And they shall judge the people at all times, and it shall be that any major matter they shall bring to you, and they themselves shall judge every minor matter, thereby making it easier for you, and they shall bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God commands you, you will be able to survive. And also all the people will come upon their place in peace. Moses obeyed his father-in-law, and he did all that he said. Later in Parshat Bahalotcha, which we just read, Moshe, even with all of that, Moshe goes to God and says, this burden is too much for me. I can't handle it by myself. And God gives him the 70 elders. So here we see in the Torah this place of hierarchy. It certainly isn't in contradiction that people are born with certain inalienable rights of equality. But here we see that we'll call it the vision of a workers' paradise, of communism, where everyone would be equal and everyone would share the burden equally, everyone according to their need, everyone according to their ability. And on paper, it's maybe sounded good, but I mean, at one point there were communist countries all over the world. Now, I believe we're down to maybe 4. I could be wrong, but it's Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, and China. We have lots of dictators, that's for sure, but I'm just saying the communist ideal failed. And obviously we have the whole kibbutz system, which was much more pure than the Russian idea of communism. But there's virtually no kibbutz left that has maintained that kind of equality, because they found that it didn't work. It didn't match with human nature. But we still have the idea that there should be equality. We know that throughout history, there's been terrible inequalities where societies didn't accept that everyone is equal. And to this day, we have dictators and tyrants all over the world. But so the idea of promoting equality, whether it's in the workplace or in freedom of religion and all of the other places where we need freedom and we need equality, so that goes without saying. But also the the idea of trying to squash any differences between people and talents that people have. That's one of the reasons why communism fell apart, because everyone was so equal. It didn't matter who had the talent to be a little bit higher on the hierarchy. For those who remember, I remember in high school, we had to read the book Animal Farm. Anyone read the book Animal Farm? So this was we'll call it a parable of, it was like an analysis of communism, where all the animals on the farm became equal, but some of them became more equal than others. and the whole thing fell apart. So this is the challenge that we have as individuals. Is a lot of people don't like taking orders. A lot of people don't like to be told what to do. But it says in Pirkei Avot that if there wasn't government, people would eat themselves up alive. And this idea was taken in another very, very famous book, The Lord of the Flies, another book that we had to read in high school. I'm not complaining. I remember it was really a very powerful book, The Lord of the Flies, which tells the story of, I don't remember exactly, but I believe it was a shipwreck of very, very proper English high society schoolboys that were shipwrecked on this island, and within weeks they became like wild animals. It was a very, very powerful statement about people and societies and the nature of human beings and different drives, everything. If anyone's never read it, it's called The Lord of the Flies. So having said all of that, just the idea is, like, a lot of people at work like really have a hard time, like with some of the boss and some of their co-workers who have a little bit more authority than they do. This is just what happens all over the world. Is we chafe against hierarchy. And yet, without it, people would eat each other up alive. If we had no order, we had no levels of authority, like Yitro's advice to Moshe, where every army in the world is based on this, every government, whether it's national government, state government, county government, city government, there's a hierarchy of responsibility and giving the orders and that whole thing that we know very well. But the challenge is that it shouldn't contradict the equality of people. So just another few examples is the Jewish people are divided into three divisions. You have Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. And each one has its own set of responsibilities, its privileges. And yet we don't think of a Kohen being better than a Levi, or a Levi being better than a Yisrael, but they do have different tasks. I think everyone either has read the book or has heard of the book. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. This idea where that the equality of men and women in many aspects is is needed, whether it's in the right to vote or pay scales in the workplace or all the other different ways of the equality of men and women. But then you get into this, I don't know, very, we call it liberal headspace, where some people want to erase that there's no difference between men and women. No difference whatsoever, psychologically, emotionally, at all. But it's not human nature. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. It doesn't make Mars more equal than Venus. It's just an understanding that there are differences between people, between sexes, between ages. We'll say the whole thing of bar and bat mitzvah, that according to our tradition, until a certain age, a child is not responsible for doing the mitzvah. So you could say, well, why not? They're a human being. Why shouldn't they be responsible? Well, it's an acknowledgement that people grow into maturity. A child is not equal with an adult in many areas. I mean, in the last generation or two, there's been a lot of attempts in child rearing, where parents are encouraged to be best friends with their children. Now, there's something very positive about this, very positive, but there's also something not so positive, that parents are the parents. And you could say children and parents are equal. Well, in one level, that's absolutely true. But the parent is the parent. And there's the fourth of the 10 commandments is, you shall honor your father and your mother. There is a hierarchy here. There's students and teachers. And we have certain actual laws of how a student is to relate to their teacher. Now, does that mean that they're not equal as human beings? No, they're equal. But there is a difference in a relationship between a teacher and a student, between a Rebbe and a Chassid. There is a difference. Also, let's say Hitbodedut, where Rebbe Nachman teaches us that we should talk to God as if we're talking to our best friend. So there's something very beautiful about this, very powerful, honest. It brings out so much within us. But is God really, is that it? God's just our best friend? Not quite. In fact, in Yom Kippur, one of the famous tunes that we sing is we go through, I don't remember how many, but we go through approximately 15 different relationships that we have with God. God is the shepherd and we are the flock. God is the master and we are the servant. God is the beloved and we are the lover. God is the king and we are the servant. It goes to like 15 different relationships. And most of them are based on a recognition that we're not exactly equal with God. But on the other hand, to be able to talk to God as our best friend, there has to be that feeling of best friends. So it can be challenging. And each person, each society, each community, each workplace, each family has to deal with the two truths here of equality and hierarchy. So in this piece, I'm just trying to point out some of the challenges of these two very, very important concepts. And each one needs to be nurtured and acted upon. But sometimes it can be challenging when our sense of equality butts up against certain hierarchies, especially when dealing with red tape, with bureaucracy. So we all know how frustrating that can be, that there's certain people who can decide like our fate in these, small matters. And it's like who gave them the power that they can do such a thing? But that's how societies work. And there are many negative aspects to this. But as it says in Pirkei Avot, if we didn't have that, people would eat each other up alive. So I bless us all to be able to balance these ideas in our own lives, the way we look at other people, the way we look at situations, and make all of the tikkunim that we need to make.